This is Steve Earle, and you're listening to the Steve Earle Show, Hardcore Troubadour Radio in Outlaw Country. And our tendency around here, as you probably gathered after the last... How long have I been on the damn radio, Jeremy? 7 years here.
Really?
Yeah, 7 years. Ever since I was on Air America the whole time that it existed, and when that ended, I came here. So I've been doing this for a while now. But we talk about songs and songwriters more than we do anything else around here, just because it's my fucking show. And my guest this week, this is really cool that I'm getting to do this. John Mellencamp, who we used to run into each other on a yearly basis. It hasn't happened in a while at Farm Aid, but you have a new record out, and we are here to talk about that. How are you, sir?
I'm squeaking by.
Yeah.
Squeaking by.
So it's a different business than it was. Then
when we started it, it was a whole different.
Yeah, we come from the 80s, actually we're kind of guys that really from the 70s that got to be a thing in the 80s. I think that's probably pretty.
And also two guys like me and you, we had to carve out our own niche.
Right.
There wasn't really a place for us. There were other, there were so many singer-songwriters, when we started. I mean,
Bob Dylan invented the job and immediately took all the fucking air out of the room. It's a tough gig.
He put down a big footprint and said, fill it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No doubt about it. I wanted to talk about that a little bit before we play songs from the new record. I found your career really interesting because I watched it from the very beginning. People that were writing, that were singer-songwriters were what I gravitated towards. And you had to go to England to from where you're from to sort of get going making records. And that's and then you come to New York. I guess you made records after that. And then you ended up, when it started to work was when you went home
right
to Indiana to make records.
Well, I didn't have a lot of selection when I started. Steve, I was in a bar band and I came to New York the first time and I was either going to try to get in the New York Art Student League, which is a painting school.
Right.
And I wanted to do that or get a record deal. And I got a record deal.
That happened first.
Quicker than I got the money to go to school.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, at that time, there was more money in the music business than there was in painting.
Right.
So, things have changed. That may not be true anymore. Right. It's like, yeah. Well, this is we want to play some tracks from the new record just to get started. It's plain spoken,
right?
And we'll talk about working with T Bone Burnett and the influence that T Bone Burnett can have on making records, because I had that experience finally, and I'm a big fan of his just as a human being when it comes right down to it. He's pretty interesting cat. But this track is, I guess we'll start out with Troubled Man.
Sure.
All right. This is Steve Earle. Listen to the Steve Earle Show, Hardcore Troubadour Radio and Outlaw Country, and my guest is John Mellencamp, and we've been talking about the new record. I also want to talk about one of the reasons I moved to New York 9 years ago is theater and just aspirations I have. I'd written a play, and now I'm working on developing one of my records from a few years back into a musical.
Right.
But so this whole, when I started hearing about rumors, and I heard this from not music channels, but from theater channels around town, I started hearing that you were working with Stephen King and that T-Bone was involved in a musical, and which is Ghost Brothers of Darkland County, and
right.
And that's touring right now as we speak.
It's getting ready to start touring with 2 new leads. Or Steve and I are still tweaking with it. Being a creative guy, that work is never done. It's just abandoned. It's just, and we're not ready to abandon it yet. We don't feel like it's where it should be. And
theater's that kind of medium. I mean, they say, like directors, when you're making films, it's the director's medium. Television is the writer and producer's medium, is what it's become. But theater's interesting because I've had that live theater experience. I had a theater company for a while in Tennessee, but once the rehearsals are finished and it goes up, unless you keep tweaking it, the actors, performers have it, and you have no control over this thing that you've created.
Well, we'll have performances. Steve and I will attend periodically and see where the actors have taken it, and then we reconvene and go, this needs to happen. We need to do this. This needs to happen. I don't think the audience got this part. because there's live ghosts on stage, and so at first, like, how do we identify these people
as ghosts?
Yeah, as ghosts,
Yeah.
and it's like, well, we'll use a blue light. Well, that didn't work. It just didn't work because the people were moving around so much. The blue lights were crossing across the live people,
Gotcha.
and so then we finally took a hint from a movie called City of Angels, where all the angels wore black trench coats. Well, let's put when the ghosts are ghosts, let's put them in white choir robes.
Wow.
So
that's theatrics.
Yeah,
that's theater.
And that was the answer. It was like, okay, there's no doubt who is live and who's dead now.
Cool.
Because these people that were the ghosts, the way that Steve has written it, there's flashbacks to when they were kids.
Right.
So sometimes they're live and sometimes they're dead. So it was difficult. Working
with Stephen King, that's got to be a little intimidating. It would be for me, just as somebody that writes words at all, just because I mean, as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing separates Stephen King from Edgar Allan Poe in 100 years in a heartbeat.
Well, but I have to tell you, one of the greatest things about Ghost Brothers is my relationship with Steve. Steve and I are, he's one of my best friends.
Yeah, that's very cool.
And it's great. And he makes you and I look very sophisticated.
Well, it's one of those things. The reason that I think Stephen King and I have a very strange relationship. He used to materialize at my shows, and he would never call, never try to get a ticket, never try to get backstage. I'd look in the pit at the Bluebird in Denver, and he'd be down front because he was filming something. And he did it for a long time. And then he was on my radio show, but he did it by I asked him from Florida. Was when he was hanging out down there, and then he showed up when I was at the New Yorker Festival at just a panel thing that I did, and I saw him in the audience. I finally figured out he just doesn't want to be photographed with me because I'm a Yankees fan.
No, well, maybe, perhaps, but that's just Steve doesn't want to ever be any trouble. He doesn't want to ever use his celebrity for any reason, and he's as common as common can be, and
a big music fan,
and a huge. Listen, I know for a fact he loves you. He loves James McMurtry.
Yeah.
He'll call me and go, "Hey, have you heard the new Steve Earle record? Hey, have you heard the new James McMurtry record? Have you?" He's always texting me, "Hey, listen to this record. This guy sounds like you, John." And so him and I have a very good rapport. And it was just his birthday the other day. It was on Sunday. He was 65, I think.
Wow. Yeah. That's funny. That's 60s talking. I'm going to be 60 my next birthday. That's like I don't know. I guess that's what happens. It beats the alternative when you get right down to it. Right. Let's play another track from the new record and tell us a little bit about Isolation of Mister.
Well, I'm sure the same thing happens to you. I don't really write these songs anymore. I'm out of my own way. When I was younger, I was always in my way.
Right.
I wrote a song called Pink Houses, and the first two verses were channeled, but then I thought I had to get involved in the chorus. And then I put my 2 cents in, and consequently, when I hear the song on the radio, it's just like, oh, God, why don't you keep your mouth shut? Just whatever was coming to you. Because I can, I still have the original writing, and the last verse that was channeled to me, so much better, but John had to get involved.
Right.
But nowadays, John knows better not to get involved. So you take a song like Isolation of Mister, and I don't know, after I play it about 80, 90 times, I'll be able to tell you what it's about. But, I know it's about men and our hardships the regrets that we have had about, either the way we raised our children or the relationships we've had with women or the way we treated ourselves.
The relationships that we have with anybody because we're men. This is John Mellencamp in Outlaw Country. John Mellencamp in Outlaw Country. This is Steve Earle. You listen to the Steve Earle Show. I wanted to talk a little bit about T Bone Burnett just because it's interesting because I've known T Bone a long time, and just because he's a Texan, and there's a whole group of people that I consider to be really important that all grew up in Fort Worth. And there's a thing at, Delbert McClinton and Gary Nicholson, who's a friend of mine, is a songwriter and really good friend of T-Bone's. And Stephen Bruton was a really, really dear friend of mine and kind of a guru to a lot of us that are my age that kind of came up just behind him. He was like sort of the connection between, he's a few years older than me, but he was sort of the connection between me and T-Bone and, Bob Dylan for that matter. And Chris Christopherson's how I met Chris Christopherson, and how Christopherson found out about my music was through Bruton. But T-Bone, when I finally got to work with him, I found it to be absolutely everything that it was cracked up to be, in the sense of he didn't say very much. We just got a lot of great players and got them into the room, and we recorded out there, in his little den out there in
LA,
in Studio D there, right. With those guys, Jay Belleros, all those guys, and actually Dennis Crouch, that bass player in that rhythm section, he stole out of my bluegrass band. That's the first place he ever saw Dennis play, and he did, I did insist that T-Bone play on everything because he's a great guitar player, and there's a vibe thing that happens, but I found. The big experience was when I recorded this one track that I'd written for this television show. It was in Terme. That was the first thing I did with T-Bone, and we did it in New Orleans. And it was me and him. Alan Toussaint wrote the horn chart, and we did rehearse the whole thing live. And Jay was there to play, and we get ready to do it. And then we go through a couple of takes, we tweak a couple of things, and then T-Bone walks into the vocal booth, and he says, "Okay. Now you need to go back to where you were on the first tape that you sent me on the first night." And it was just because he knew that. I think it's the single best recording I've ever made in my life. Right. He doesn't miss stuff like that.
Well, he's not afraid to go backwards.
Right.
He knows when you've gone too far, and what he really was helpful with me is that, I have these musicians and I just over arranged everything.
Right.
There were too many counter melodies. There was too much music, I got to the point where there was just too much music happening, and the songs were totally getting lost.
Right.
Inside the arrangements.
Well, you're a great band leader. I mean, I remember I saw the Lunson Jubilee tour. God, where did I go? I guess it was probably in Lexington, Kentucky or someplace. I remember I traveled, there to see the show, at that point in the 80s, there was a thing that happened where you sort of found this voice with acoustic instruments in rock and roll.
Right.
That I think was really important, and people have been copying ever since. But there was a lot going on there. There was all this stuff that flows in and out. And it's beautiful. It was like, it all almost felt like orchestral music.
Yeah,
it got right down to it.
There just became a time, and it got worse after that. It got a lot worse after that, and pretty soon it was like the songs were just disappearing, and the music was taking over. So Henry was able to come in and go, "John, let's just get rid of all this stuff." And the first record I made with him, I used my touring band, and we got the whole thing in Indiana, and he just stood in the rehearsal room and said, "You don't need that. You don't need that.
Take this out. Take that out."
Yeah, it was more of he was an eraser.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's Guy Clark always says, that. How does he write his songs with a pencil and a really big eraser? what you don't say is really important. I wonder, T-Bone is when in my working with him, I think I got back to some stuff that I kept, and I don't know whether I'll ever work with him again, just because of money more than anything else. He's not a cheap date, and it's in the record business, big what it is, and but I learned a lot of stuff that I'll keep. It's one of those things. He's just one of those guys that he's witnessed a lot of stuff, and he carries it around with him all the time. I think this idea, the way the music business has changed, do you find some sort of comfort and strength in the idea that it's sort of become, being a singer-songwriter is definitely art now. It's not there's something liberating about it not being part of the pop mainstream in the way that it was when we came up?
I actually think that it's our age.
Yeah, absolutely. And the age of our audience.
Yeah, it's our age more than that. And I think that the music business really messed up when the internet came, because all the internet really is a new delivery system.
Right.
You know, a new way of delivering information and music, but nobody went stop. You know, hey, wait a minute. Because when radio was invented, you know, that was a new delivery system of music. Before that, they didn't really have, they had those, 78s.
Right.
And then this new delivery system shows up, and these radio stations in the countries and in the cities start playing music, and the record companies go, wait a minute, you're selling advertisement. We should be able to make some kind of deal. And they made a deal, and everybody was happy, and the radio stations prospered, and the artists prospered, and people were actually able to make a living being singer-songwriters, being in bands.
Right.
And then it got so bloated with CDs, when CDs came out, that the record companies started selling catalogs. They didn't give a shit about, about artists, because if they didn't have success in artists, well, we'll just repackage, Steve Earle's first two records.
Oh, there's more. I have more reissues of different songs in different orders than I do studio albums, and I made 15 studio albums.
So that's how, so they were making money that way, and they were older guys. And Steve, if you look at all these guys that we had to pay attention to and listen to, which I personally hated, I didn't like dealing with them at all. None of these guys have a job. If they're so damn smart, why aren't they running Coca-Cola now? Where are all these people?
Right.
And so they just kind of threw their hands up. Well, we don't know what to do with this internet. Hey, and I would say to these guys, how about making it a new delivery system the same way radio and television? How do you think people made money on television?
Yeah.
To me, it's not really about the money, but it's about the art. Because now, if somebody was to ask you, I know your son records.
Yeah, he does, and I don't know what to tell him.
Yeah, because
it's a different music business.
Yeah, and the knowledge that you've acquired is not applicable anymore.
It absolutely is not.
So how does a kid, make a living being a songwriter?
Yeah, it's a weird. Yeah, it's a strange thing. It's like, I used to not allow my music to be put into ads at all, and I didn't do that for two reasons. I'm the generation that I am, and Neil Young didn't do it, and Tom Waits didn't do it.
Right.
So that seemed like that they seem to carry themselves. But then it dawned on me, Neil's been rich since he was 20 years old, and I'm trying to make a living. So.
Yeah, but here's also the difference too. It was a different time. You had a different way to make money.
Yeah,
your publishing brought in money. Your record sales brought in money, and then when that all dried up, it was kind of like, hey, I've got, just like you said, I've got to make a living. I turned down unbelievable amounts of money during the 80s and early 90s, Chrysler and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then it just dawned on me. My dad said it, I got offered this Chevy deal, and I was really on the fence about it.
I actually had that ad just before you did, and they, for some reason, I think they got wind of some stuff that I said politically or something happened, and they pulled my ad, and you got it next. The Silverado thing.
Yeah.
And I had that ad just before you did for about 3 weeks.
And I was really on the fence about it, but they were offering me so much money that, and I was talking to my dad about it, and he goes, John, and at the time he goes, you're this old, why are you, what are you trying to protect?
There's still lines that I draw, but an American made, union made truck, I can do that. There's some things like pharmaceutical companies I don't do. I do voiceovers, but I don't do them for pharmaceutical companies. I don't, for my own personal reasons, do beer. I don't do alcohol because I've got my own personal reasons not to do that, and I don't do the military. And people have still worked with me, even though I draw those lines. But for the most part, I got to find a way to make a living. I have a radio show. I tour constantly, and I'm going through another divorce. So it's,
This divorce,
you know what Willie said. Why divorces cost so much? Because they're worth it.
Yeah, that's right. Well, but all joking aside, they're really hard on you.
They are. It's tough for me. I got a little guy that's got autism, and he's 4 years old, and that's hard enough to do with two people under the same roof. He's doing pretty good. He's in a great school here, but I decided to start over having kids again in my mid-50s. So it's one of those deals. It's one of the things that can happen. But I guess doing what we do now is more like being a jazz musician or a bluegrass musician. It's deciding you're going to do something hard. I mean, you can make a living at it, and a really good living, but it's not what it used to be, where there's all this mailbox.
Well, I view my records now as calling cards.
Yeah,
and I think that's the way they were. When Bob first started making records, it was a calling card.
Yeah,
and that's why they set those standards. 500,000 records was like a big deal,
right?
And a platinum record was unheard of,
right?
So I think we're back to that, and so the best, for me, it's like I made this record. It's a calling card. Hey, I still make records. This is what I'm doing now.
What I'm selling is vinyl. We made a deal. The records I had on Artemis Records, that label was actually in receivership, so the deal was easy to make. We're getting ready to do it with Warner, we think, but we reissued. We just bought the rights to reissue that stuff on vinyl. I sell the shit out of it.
What is your song that you like the best that you've written?
Oh God, probably My Old Friend the Blues. It's on the first record that I made, but I still sing it every night, and I don't think there's anybody that can't relate to it. It's just about that whole idea that the cure for the blues is not necessarily up tempo and positive. Like, and when I'm really bummed out, then nothing pisses me off worse than somebody trying to cheer me up before I'm good and ready. And it's about sort of embracing that you have to go through the process. So my
favorite song by you is this song where it was about football and 33.
Number 29.
29, yeah.
Yeah, wow, that's right.
Beautiful
do you remember when we met? Do you recall where it was? I do. I remember very, very clearly.
Well, I don't want to get into it, but I remember you at Farm Aid, too.
That's right, on your bus.
You were pretty jacked up.
I was. I've been up all night.
Call it what you like.
I played at 10 o'clock in the morning.
You did?
In the 80s, I didn't know anything to do with 10 o'clock.
Steve came in my bus, and I didn't know this kid. And
I was on your bus when you got on your bus.
And he was a kid. He was a kid, and I mean, he did not shut up.
I still kind of don't shut up, but it was
but that was okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was just like me and the guys in the band was like, man, this guy can really lay out some language here.
Well, it's one of those things, and I just kind of learned to write it down and make some of it rhyme. That's all. That's really kind of all I can do.
Well, listen, it
was an honor to be a part of that. But how was Farm Aid this year?
It was great.
Yeah, cool.
It was great. It was Jack Weiss stole the show.
Yeah,
he came out and just was just great. But I had so much fun with Neil. Most fun I've ever had with Neil.
Cool.
Neil he was the first time. Neil can be kind of dour at times, but he's totally doesn't do anything anymore, and he just got a divorce, and he's so happy. And it was just I just laughed at him because it was like, cool. Who is this guy?
Yeah, cool. And you've been doing those things for a long time. It's an honor to be part of it. I try to do it a lot of times nowadays with the way the music business changed. By the time you guys, announce the date, I'm already locked up. So that's why I haven't been available for the last few years.
You still have the same manager?
Absolutely. Well, Danny Goldberg for the last 10 years.
So he doesn't like me.
He does. He likes me just fine.
No, he doesn't like me.
But he's it's one of those things. He's my neighbor down the street here in New York City, and he's things got better for me.
I like living here.
I love it. It's where I'm supposed to be, I think. I mean, everybody's got to be somewhere, and it took me a while to find my place, or maybe it was time. It's like sticking your finger in a light socket. I'm just trying to keep writing songs.
Yeah.
One of those deals.
Yeah, I would never imagine you leaving Nashville.
It was weird. I was there 33 years, but you know what? I think being able to not, to never say never is kind of, I didn't think I would have a kid in my 50s, and I didn't think I would ever get married again. All those other times I was married, that was the 80s, and I was on drugs. And I stayed, since I've been sober, I've only been married once, and it's probably be the only time. I think I'm.
How long were you just married for?
9 years. We're still going through the divorce. It's a record for me. So.
Yeah, I have that problem. I get the 7-year itch once every 3 years.
Yeah, I used to think relationships last 3 years. Been talking to John Mellencamp. The new record is called Plain Spoken, and we're going to take you out with another track from it. It's been a blast. It's good to see you, man.
Appreciate it, buddy.
Cool. All right. See y'all.